Welcome to the Trend Micro Deep Security 10 for Administrators video series. This collection of videos provides an overview of tasks that may be required as part of your work as an administrator in Deep Security Manager. Deep Security provides real-time, on-demand, or scheduled protection against threats. In this video lesson, we will enable and configure the Antimalware Protection module to protect servers against malware. The Deep Security Antimalware module provides real-time, on-demand, or scheduled protection against file-based threats, including malware, viruses, trojans, spyware, and ransomware. To identify these threats, the Antimalware module checks the files against a comprehensive threat database, portions of which are hosted online or kept locally as updatable patterns. The Antimalware module also checks files for certain characteristics, such as compression and known exploit code. Deep Security also provides security settings that you can apply to Windows machines that are protected by a Deep Security agent to enhance your malware and ransomware detection and clean rate. These settings go beyond malware pattern matching and identify suspicious files that could potentially contain emerging malware that hasn't yet been added to the anti-malware patterns. To address these threats, the Antimalware Protection module selectively performs actions that contain or remove the threats while minimizing system impact. The Antimalware Protection module can clean, delete, or quarantine malicious files. It can also terminate processes and delete other system objects that are associated with identified threats. A newly installed Deep Security agent cannot provide anti-malware protection until it has contacted an update server to download anti-malware patterns and updates. Ensure that your Deep Security agents can communicate with a Deep Security relay or the global Trend Micro update servers after installation. The Anti-Malware Protection module must be configured before it can identify malware, and there are 3 steps as part of this configuration. In the first step, you're going to identify how the Deep Security Anti-Malware Protection module is going to scan, and you're going to do this by configuring a malware scan configuration. You're then going to identify which machines are going to use the configuration, and this could be done through a policy or by assigning it directly to a computer. And then you're going to identify when the scans should be executed. And here again, this can be done in the policy or directly on the computer. Let's go into the Deep Security Manager web console and take a look at how we're going to create our malware scan configuration. I've logged into the Deep Security Manager web console as my master administrator, and on the menu, click Policies. Malware scan configurations are created as a common object, meaning that this configuration can be used over and over again once it has been configured. In the right-hand pane, there is a list of scan configurations that are available in the software by default. So we have a scan configuration that can be used for real-time scanning, one for manual scanning, one for scheduled scanning. In this example, let's create a new configuration which will then apply to a collection of computers. Click New, and in this case, let's create a real-time scan configuration. On the General tab, let's begin by typing a name for the scan configuration. So I'm going to call this one the Video Scan Configuration, and type a description to identify this configuration. In this case, it's going to be the sample that we're going to use for our demonstration. It's going to be applied for real-time scanning, and we'll take a look at the scan timings later on. And then we're going to identify the different scanning methods that are going to be used. The first one is to scan documents for exploits. And this is where we're going to use the traditional pattern-based virus scanning, and this is going to be responsible for detecting file-based viruses. A new setting, which is available in Deep Security 10, is to scan for exploits against known critical vulnerabilities. So here it's going to use the file-based virus scanning and aggressive detection of unknown suspicious codes. And this is going to be used as part of the connected threat defense system, where unknown suspicious exploits are going to be submitted to the Deep Discovery Analyzer. Deep Security 10 introduces the concept of behavior monitoring. Deep Security provides security settings that you can apply to Windows machines that are protected by a Deep Security agent to enhance the malware and ransomware detection and clean rate. These settings allow you to go beyond malware pattern matching and identify suspicious files that could potentially contain emerging malware that hasn't yet been added to the anti-malware patterns. This includes threat detection. To avoid detection, some types of malware attempt to modify system files or files related to known installed software. These types of changes often go unnoticed because the malware takes the place of legitimate files. Deep Security can monitor system files and installed software for unauthorized changes to detect and prevent these changes from occurring. Behavior monitoring also includes an anti-exploit mechanism. Malware writers can use malicious code to hook into user mode processes in order to gain privileged access to trusted processes and hide the malicious activity. In Deep Security, the anti-exploit functionality monitors for processes that may be performing actions that are not typically performed by a given process. Deep Security can determine whether a process has been compromised and then terminate the process to prevent further infection. Behavior monitoring also includes some extended ransomware protection. The ransomware protection offered by Deep Security can protect documents against unauthorized encryption or modification. Deep Security can also incorporate a data recovery engine that can optionally create copies of files being encrypted to offer users an added chance of recovering files that may have been encrypted by a ransomware process. Note that next to the behavior monitoring category name, there's a collection of icons. For example, behavior monitoring, if you click the icon, this tells you that this particular mechanism is available to Windows machines only, that it does require a Deep Security agent to be installed on the Windows computer, and this particular feature may have an impact on performance. Take a look at the icons next to the method category to see if there are any limitations to these particular scanning methods. Endpoint correlation scanning was added in Deep Security 10 as well. Now, in some cases, malware writers will use a wrapper file to deliver malware and avoid detection by conventional scanning methods. When the wrapper file is executed, it often creates or drops another file or process. Endpoint correlation allows Deep Security to identify and prevent these types of threats. Endpoint correlation analyzes the infection chain of malware outbreak and can trigger a chain cleanup for malware accomplice files that are deemed suspicious but have not yet been put into a signature pattern. Notice that this method is also limited to Windows, requires a Deep Security agent to be installed on the Windows computer, and may have an effect on system performance. The spyware and grayware scanning method detects and removes file-based components of malware. Damage cleanup, along with the spyware scanning API, detects and cleans malware-related system alterations outside of the file system. For example, malware processes that are running in memory or modified registry entries. the IntelliTrap method is available for real-time scanning. Virus writers often attempt to circumvent virus filtering by using real-time compression algorithms. IntelliTrap helps reduce the risk of such viruses entering your network by blocking real-time compressed executable files and pairing them with other malware characteristics. It's important to consider that because IntelliTrap identifies such files as security risks and may incorrectly block safe files, consider quarantining files when you enable IntelliTrap instead of deleting or cleaning the files. If users regularly exchange real-time compressed executable files, you may consider disabling IntelliTrap. Process memory scan is another scanning mechanism that's available for Windows computers that are hosting a deep security agent. Malware writers often use customized packers that can trick file-based anti-malware engines and bypass detection. Typical virus patterns are constructed into binary machine code, and this machine code can be repackaged using these packing tools. Since most conventional anti-malware detection is based on virus signatures, this repacking of the virus machine code can bypass conventional detection. Deep Security can now monitor process memory in real time, and once a process is determined to be suspicious, Deep Security will perform additional checks with the Trend Micro Smart Protection Network to determine whether the process is a known good process. If these checks determine it is not a known good process, Deep Security will terminate the running process. And finally, in your configuration, you can select whether you'd like an alert to be generated when the malware scan configuration is triggered. As part of your configuration, you're going to identify which directories are going to be scanned when this configuration is used. You can select all directories. Every folder and directory on your computer is going to be scanned, or you can select from the directory list. And this allows you to select individual directories. You're going to create a directory list as a common object, and you can do this by typing the directory names into this dialog box, and you're going to put one directory on each line. There's some help at the bottom of this dialog box which identifies some of the formats that you can use for the directories. You can also select which files are going to be scanned within those folders and directories. The default is to scan all files, but you can also create a custom file extension list by creating a new common object, or you can select file types scanned by IntelliScan. In this case, the administrator is going to rely on the Trend Micro recommendations. IntelliScan is a method of identifying which files to scan as determined from the file content. In the event that a file is not an executable, for example, a TXT file, IntelliScan will use the file header to verify the true file type. So if someone tries to hide an executable file by renaming it with a TXT extension, IntelliScan is going to be able to determine the true nature of that file. This example, I'm going to leave the files to scan to all files and the directory scan to all directories. Scan settings on the Exclusion tab are going to define the folders and files to ignore when this configuration is used. When the Antimalware Protection module is enabled, there are certain files and folders that should not be scanned. Now, the reason for this could be that the files are unscannable due to being encrypted, or the files are locked, or scanning these files could cause performance issues or cause software using these files to become unstable. If you take a look in the Trend Micro knowledge base, there is an article which details the recommended exclusions when using Trend Micro products. Scan settings on the Advanced tab define various settings, such as scanning of linked or embedded objects, scanning of compressed files, as well as the remediation of malware files. When a piece of malware is discovered, there's going to be certain actions that are going to be performed. Under remediation actions, we currently have it set to use the recommended default for remediation. You can also override these actions and select some custom values. So in this case, I'm going to use custom actions, and when a virus is encountered, instead of cleaning it, I can modify this to quarantine it. You can also select an option called Active Action. With Active Action, the administrator relies on Trend Micro action recommendations that are stored within the virus scanning pattern. Trend Micro antivirus engineers define these actions based on their analysis of various malware types. And finally, you can enable the scanning of network directories. And finally, on the Assign To tab, we can see which policies and which computers are currently using this malware scan configuration. At this point, we haven't assigned it to any computers, so the list is blank. I'm going to click OK to save the malware scan configuration, and you'll notice that it's added in the list. So that completes the first phase, where we identify how the scanning is going to be performed. The next step is to define which machines are going to use this malware scan configuration. And to do that, I'm going to go to the policies list. There is a collection of policies which are available in the software by default. Policies are collections of settings that are applied to a group of machines, which then enforce a particular behavior on those machines. If we would like a group of computers to use this malware scan configuration, we can apply the configuration to the policy, and any computers that are using this policy will inherit this collection of scan configuration settings. In our example, let's create a new policy. So from the policy menu, I'm going to create a new policy, and let's call this the video policy. I am going to inherit the settings from a pre-existing policy. So in this case, I don't have to start from zero and set the policy settings for every protection module. I can select an existing policy, and we're going to inherit all of the existing settings from that policy. Do we want to base this on an existing computer's configuration? No, we don't. And in this case, we want to enable the Antimalware Protection module for any computers that are using this policy. And the policy is created, and we're brought directly to the policy details window. Notice that the Anti-Malware Protection module is now enabled, and it's using real-time scanning. If I click on the Anti-Malware Protection module on the left-hand pane, you'll notice that I have my 3 different types of scanning. So we have real-time scanning, manual scanning, and scheduled scanning. When we created our real-time scan configuration, we created this configuration for real-time scanning. So I'm going to turn off Inherited, and from the Malware Scan configuration list, I'm going to select my video scan configuration that I created. When is this scan going to be run? Well, it's going to be run every day, all day. The manual scan is also inherited, and in this case we inherit it from the Windows policy, which is the one that we based our video policy on. And you could select a different scan configuration, or you can click New and create a new configuration. Let's leave this one as the default. And the same for scheduled. I'm going to turn off inherited, and I could select a new scan configuration from the list. Let's click Save, and my policy is being updated. And you'll note that the video policy is now available in the list. I want to run this particular type of scanning on a collection of computers. So now what I need to do is identify which computers are going to use this particular policy. Let's return to the computers list. And just as an example, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to one of my computers, say for example, vmdsr.training.local, double click to bring up the details, and under policy, I'm going to apply the video policy that I just created. So this computer is going to inherit that collection of scanning configuration settings. Click Save and close, and it'll just take a moment for the computer to be updated. I can view tasks that are currently in process on a computer by adding a column to the computers list. Click Columns and add the task column. The task column is going to display any tasks that are currently in process. So for our computer, you'll notice that we currently have a security update in process. Once this item has disappeared from the task list, it means that the task is completed and that the protection is in place. Just going to wait for this item to clear from the task column. So you'll notice it's gone, and now the protection is applied on my DSR computer. To verify that the malware scanning is working properly, let's go to this computer and access a piece of malware. I'm now on the vm.dsr computer, which is now using the policy with the scan configuration applied to it. In my web browser, I'm going to access a website and download a piece of malware. I'm going to go to the icar.com website, and I'm going to download an anti-malware test file. Note that the notifier appears identifying that a malware event has taken place. And I get a warning here telling me that I'm downloading the file, so I'm going to cancel that operation. If I double click on the Deep Security notifier and I go to View Events, we can see that on this date and time, we tried to access an infected file, and here the file was quarantined. Let's go back to the Deep Security Manager computer and let's see how this event is displayed in the web console. So I'm back in the Deep Security Manager web console. In the computers list, let's go to our vm.dsr computer and double click to bring up the details. Click the Anti-Malware Protection module in the left-hand frame and click the Anti-Malware Events tab. And note that the event related to this piece of malware being downloaded is displayed. Double-click on the event to bring up details. And you'll notice here we used the video scan configuration and we quarantined the file. If a file is quarantined, it'll be displayed in the Identified Files tab. Here is the file that was accessed, and you'll notice that you have an option to restore the file. So if you determine that this file was incorrectly identified as malware, you can restore it to its original location, or you can download the file. If it's a piece of malware and you'd like to investigate further, you can download this piece of malware to a secure computer and investigate the code for the malware. In this example, we assigned the malware scan configuration to a policy. all of the computers that were using that policy inherit that malware scan configuration. You can also assign the anti-malware scan configuration to a computer. In this case, the configuration is going to be assigned to this single computer and not a collection of computers through the policy. Double-click on the computer to bring up the details. Select the Antimalware Protection module in the left-hand pane and turn the Antimalware Protection module on and click Save. So you'll notice the state is on, but no configuration has been assigned yet. So under RealTime Scan, I'm going to disable Inherited, and I'm going to select my video scan configuration, and I'm going to select a schedule to say this scan is going to be run every day, all day. Click Save, click Close, and you'll notice the policy is being sent to that computer. If this is the first time that the Anti-Malware Protection module has been enabled on this computer, the components that are required to run the protection module are also going to be installed. The task column is cleared, so the protection module is now in place. So far, we've been doing real-time scanning, which means the files are scanned every time they're read or they're written. You can also do manual and scheduled scanning. Double-click on the computer to bring up the details. Click the Anti-Malware Protection module in the left-hand frame. And for manual scan configuration, you'll notice that it currently doesn't have a configuration, and this is inherited from a parent policy. So I'm going to disable Inherited, and I'm going to select a scan configuration. Click Save, and that scan configuration is now enabled. And anytime you would like to perform a manual scan, there are two options at the bottom: a quick scan for malware and a full scan for malware. A quick scan for malware will scan a computer's critical system areas for currently active threats. A quick scan will look for currently active malware, but it will not perform deep file scans to look for dormant or stored infected files. It is significantly faster than a full scan on larger hard drives. Note that quick scan can only be run on Windows computers. A full scan for malware will enumerate all the files on the disk, and this scan can be run on all platforms that are supported by the Anti-Malware Protection module. Our third method is to perform a scheduled scan. Let's create a scheduled scan which is going to run once a day. So we select our configuration, and the scheduled task is configured from the administration menu, Schedule Tasks, click New, and let's create a type of task. In this case, it's going to be Scan Computer for Malware. We're going to perform this on a daily basis. You can identify when you would like it to start. So we're going to run this every day at, let's say, 2300 hours. It's going to run every day at that time. And which computers do we want to apply it to? We want to apply it to the specific computer that we've identified. So it's VM client2 training.local. And the task is now enabled, and click Finish. This completes the Scanning for Malware lesson. Be sure to return to view more videos in the Trend Micro Deep Security 10 for Administrators video series.